Hello there, Endersword here again. Going to be ranking today a bunch of things. I think we're starting with The Simpsons, tried and true, near and dear to my heart, on season 32. But I think all these are going to be things from early seasons onwards. Onwards would imply just forever. But you'll see from the pictures, basically, a lot of people, say that it got bad after like season 8. I kind of think it was really, really good till like about season 12, and but I still think there's moments in the current seasons and beyond. I think some of the best episodes are into the late teens, and you could still find one or two really good ones a season at least. It's just kind of changed tone a fair bit, but whereas obviously like seasons 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, it was just like 90% hits. Now you're kind of getting like 10-20%, but there's still some funny stuff in there and they still do some good things. But we're gonna take a look then at the old Simpsons characters and see where we're gonna place these fellas. So, tier system. I'm not sure what this last one, because this implies some sort of moral judgment. I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna change the name of this, because I don't want to be like, this is a good aligned character or a bad aligned character. I want to go more with like, is this a good, like a quality character, as opposed to, whatever. Let's just say we'll add delete character to our row. We'll call it that. So here we're kicking things off with Agnes Skinner. Her name means Lamb of God, and she yells that at Marge at some point. And she's kind of always one of those good character actors that comes in. She really defines Skinner's character, sets him in the world of playing the part of Norman Bates from Psycho, and she's the good kind of like nosy neighbor, irrational, like old Karen before there was Karens, and then super sarcastic and everything. So I think she's a pretty strong one. Certainly not a main player. You're never really going to have her carry an episode, but I think she's a pretty strong start, and I think overall good character, top tier. Now this one, character-wise, this is actually nowadays in the delete this category, because I think they've just stopped showing him. For some of the other characters, any character that's basically non-white, they have revoiced entirely, which sounds weird on Dr. Hibbert and Carl. I don't entirely, I know why they did it, but I don't really know why they did it. The Apu one, totally, it makes sense, whether you agree with it or not. Clearly that was a caricature of a voice. But like Carl, no one was like mocking that voice. It's just a voice. So it's not even like a black voice or like putting on an accent or anything. It was just a character. And Carl is supposed to be from Iceland. So whatever. But they have revoiced a lot of those. And Apu, I think, is just plain gone, is essentially where I'm saying. But I think he's been an absolute mainstay as well. And I think they actually did a lot with him where you could get some good stories that kind of go beyond, obviously, the stereotype level. I think he's had some good run-ins living with The Simpsons. He's kind of been, just given the perspective of like a small business owner in the town, like he's one of the few that's kind of on that level. I think he's got some good interactions with everyone. He's often kind of like that third location to go to late at night to have Homer go complain somewhere or whatever. So I think he, again, is probably in the B tier. You could argue knocking him down because of like the whole controversy around him, but I think it's still overall a net good character there, and I hope they can find a way to salvage him, because it's kind of shows the unintended side effect of something is, instead of replacing him and doing it a way that people would be okay with, you actually just lose that representation, and I think that's kind of exactly what you don't want to do. Now Barney has had a lot of ups and downs. He's the classic alcoholic. he eventually got sober, and then really has been reoccurringly slipping back off the wagon. So I think, again, he's been really good early on. Like, I think he was a lot stronger character in the first, like, 5-6 seasons, where he was really portrayed more as, like, Homer's best friend sort of thing. And I feel like they kind of dropped that a little more later on. But he was always kind of the one around, obviously, there at Moe's. He took on the Plow King. He used to work at the Bolorama, everything. So he's pretty good, but he's just kind of a running joke. And after, like, 30-something years of him, there's only so much you can do with, like, funny, not funny, alcoholic, whatever. But I'd probably put him C, because he's kind of a one-note gag. Again, you're not going to get much of a story built around him. There's parts where a little bit you can, like the film festival one, or where he becomes like a helicopter pilot or something, but you're not going to get a whole hell of a lot out of him. Although he did set up one of the better episodes where he brings Homer's car to New York and just abandons it there. But that's it. He's kind of a prop. Now, Bart, it's going to be hard to put the Simpsons anywhere outside of the top two, the actual family members. But Bart was originally the show. So for the first few seasons, really the main focus was on Bart, and I think the real targeted audience was towards like 12-year-olds and stuff. It wasn't really meant as a totally adult cartoon yet. It was still meant to trigger like the tween audience and so on, and he was kind of the mischievous bad boy and everything, and then later on things moved more and more to Homer. But he was obviously the original sensation, and I think is obviously the A tier. I don't know whether we'll have just the one S or I'll compromise on that, but Bart definitely an A. Now we have Bernice Hibbert. She's a very small role. I almost think, and it's kind of, again, how did this stand the test of time? But the way that they had her and Dr. Hibbert set up, it was clearly a reference to Bill and Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show. And that obviously doesn't age too well either, but it's a good portrayal that they always, I don't know if they've ever totally covered what she does. I think Claire Huxtable was a lawyer, and they kind of have her look like that sort of business person, but something. She's always like dressed up and everything, but she also apparently has alcoholism problems herself. But she's a bit player, definitely not really caring much, but she's just kind of there. But whatever. Now this guy, I think he plays the role really well. A lot of Simpsons stuff has been lawyer-based, especially very early on. This guy doesn't even have a name as far as I know. He's literally just the blue-haired lawyer who always represents Mr. Burns and things, but also represented like Itchy and Scratchy Studios, and I think the Duff Brewery, and just any side of evil business he is going to represent. I like his sarcastic attitude. He really just kind of gets it. He's the one that kind of comes across as he knows what's going on, but he's willing to kind of twist things, for his client. That's a good lawyer. So I think he goes in the B. I think when he's there, he's good. He always makes an impact. And I think when he shows up for a character that's like only there probably like one every 20 episodes or something like that, when he shows up, a lot of the episode contains him. Because it'll be like a court-based one or based on, a liability lawsuit or something like that. So that's definitely good. Now, Sideshow Bob, one of the... I think he's probably the most... Well, almost definitely is the most recurring guest star in terms of, like, celebrity voice that isn't really part of the standard cast. I think must have been there, like, 10-something times by now, if not more. And I think he just kind of carries a lot of the early stuff. Some of the best early episodes are the Cape Fear one, where Homer becomes Mr. Thompson and they have to kind of go into witness protection and everything. I think that's really good. They do a lot of good kind of callbacks with him, and then the tie-in with Frasier and everything is pretty good. Now we've got Brandine, and she's kind of, I feel like she takes a bit of a back seat to Cletus in that she's kind of there, but she almost, every time she's there, she's kind of like yelling at Cletus or something. It's like facilitating his character, or she's having a baby or something. So I think she doesn't carry much by herself, but she's obviously there to enable the redneck hill people type comedy, and it works. It works. Same joke again. It's the sort of thing that has one note, but it plays. It just kind of works. They've gone back to that family a number of times, and they always kind of find a way to make it work. This one is probably another. I don't know if they still have Bumblebee Man either, because of course this is another like obviously like offensive stereotype thing. Although it's kind of, the point is to be like a stereotype of that sort of ridiculous television and stuff, like slapstick and whatever. So it kind of works. I kind of like what they do with him, even though there's basically two notes to him. One is just the Bumblebee slapstick nonsense, but then the other is that he breaks into the serious character every now and then and demonstrates that he's actually quite intelligent, well-spoken, and wants to become a news anchor. So I think he kind of goes in that same sort of like Barney category of like, he's there, it's good, but ultimately there's only one place to like go with him, and I don't even know if they use him anymore. Carl, I think, is excellent, particularly since in much later seasons, if you don't watch it nowadays, you know, he is from Iceland, Carl Carlson, and which always made sense. I don't know, like that was always his last name, Carlson, which is like Icelandic, Norwegian, like Nordic. So I don't know whether they always had that in their mind or what, but that was kind of the storyline they went with. I think they've done a lot of good things with him. Him and Lenny together have really, you know, accomplished a lot. I liked, there was an episode where they made him Homer's boss, and he lets the power go to his head and everything. Carl's like never like hilarious, but he's just kind of that deadpan straight man that kind of, you know, occasionally just says things matter-of-factly, and it works. So that's something. Cecil Terwilliger, obviously Sideshow Bob's brother. I think pretty good character. The thing that really makes it, obviously, is that he was Niles Crane on Frasier as well, so the actors have worked together and they're basically playing the same dynamic. So I think that's what makes it work. But he doesn't, the legs aren't there as they are with Sideshow Bob. His motivations are a little sillier, and he's only going to really work for, you know, a few episodes or something here and there. So, again, I think he's kind of, I don't know, I like the fact that they brought him in enough to put him in a seat. So it's more the meta cleverness of doing it, I think. Now we have Super Nintendo Chalmers. He definitely is kind of like the ultimate straight man, and I think that's exactly how they set him up. And even like that most famous little skit of steamed hams and stuff, that was clearly set up as like an old Abbott and Costello type of routine where you've got the old vaudeville straight man and a guy being ridiculous, and he's kind of the one that's being the logical, like, so explain this to me, you idiot, sort of thing. And so I think he works really well. I think he goes in a B. I think a lot of this is going to be very top heavy, because I could end up with a ton of A's, but I think we're going to put Chalmers into a B category. I like kind of the times when you get cracks of him outside just his normal role, where he, you know, gets upset about things, or I don't know, whatever. Just his personal life side kind of breaks his authoritative superintendent side. Now we got Wiggum. You're starting to see a theme, obviously, that like a lot of characters in The Simpsons, and they refer to it, are clearly references to old things. So he's basically a reference to, I think it's Art Carney and like old honeymooners type things. So he's kind of that old school thing, and I think I don't know. I think he's a B as well. We could maybe I should have like centered things a little lower to begin with, because I think we're gonna get stacked here. But we'll see how it goes. But I think he can carry an episode or two. He can kind of be the main thing. He's really got his own kind of unique character to him, and you really know what to expect of him. He's a good one. Cletus here, I think he's just kind of the one tier up from Brandine, in that he's kind of the one carrying a lot of the jokes, and she's kind of the one bouncing off. So I think he's a C. It's again kind of in this like one note category, but he's pretty funny. He's all right. Comic book guy, I think they've gone like up and down with him. He started, I think, as a very one note sort of thing, and then I think they kind of have ultimately expanded him a little bit more by having episodes that were comic book guy centric, and he's got like a girlfriend now, and they actually finally gave him a name, Jeff Albertson, and they've just done enough with him dating Agnes. Actually, I almost want to put him like, B- sort of thing, and maybe that's what I'm gonna have to do. I think I'm gonna add some tiers here. Let's add some tiers. I'm gonna add a row above, and I'm gonna call that a B+. No, I didn't want to rename that. Call that a B+, and then I think we'll do, whatever. We'll center it around the B's. Add a row below. And we'll call this one let's call it the B sharps. This is really a B-, but we're going to call it the B sharps. And I think that's fitting. So I think if that's the case, I think he's kind of in this category, which is not quite a main player plot driver a lot. He's certainly not on the level with Carl and Wiggum, but he's there. He's got a clear defined thing, and I think when they bring him in, it's good. I think it's also how they use him is, I think as things have gotten more, like anytime they make references to things like movies and superheroes and stuff, it's made more sense to bring him in because he's related to a lot of that stuff. So it just kind of makes sense. Disco Stew is another one of kind of one note characters, but he's a pretty good one as well. Again, they show the cracks on him sometimes, that he's, he doesn't even like disco music, and he's super upset and things like that. But I think they made him up at one point when Homer was doing a yard sale, or a block yard sale, and they just thought it would be cool to have a jacket with the name Disco Stew on it, and they figured, hey, Stu, check that out. And then he just kind of stuck. I think he's pretty good. Tried to hit on Marge when she broke her leg at the ski lodge, but pretty good guy. Now we got Dolph, one of the bullies here, and he, I like them as a trio. So again, you've got everything's a reference to something. So like the three bullies are Larry, Curly, and Moe. They're the Three Stooges. That's kind of what they're supposed to be. I think I like them all together. I think collectively, as a group, they're higher than they are individually, but I just like when they're kind of a little out of character in kind of their whole dynamic, but I think individually, they're just not really totally there. Dr. Hibbert, I think he's got to be at least a B. He's definitely on the same level as a Wiggum or an Apu sort of thing, and probably a Chalmers, where it's like the professionals of the town, that he's got his role. When there's a medical emergency and you need real work done, you're going to Hibbert. When it's complete nonsense, we're going to go to Dr. Nick. But Hibbert, just good character. Overall, you know what to expect. He plays his role of straight man, and he plays the role of kind of laughing gas doctor, and kind of like corrupt and money-focused sort of doctor. But then Dr. Nick, he again, he's in that one note category, but might be a little bit higher. I think his kind of like hilarity per note, it's just a funnier note, I think, is the reality, that he's just a little bit better. And I think the fact that him and Hibbert kind of are two sides of the same coin sort of thing kind of works out well. And I think he's doing pretty good. I think he's that one tier up. So now we got the cops. Eddie is kind of the less played cop. So again, he's probably in that D category as well. He's there, but out of that cop trio, he's the least important of the three. So, Wiggum and Lou really drive it, and Eddie's just kind of there sometimes to agree with Lou or agree with Wiggum. It depends, but you kind of have the trio there, but it's really the duo that drives it, and he's just kind of along. Now Krabappel, what's her real name? Martha Raddatz, I think. She unfortunately died in real life, so this character has been retired a few seasons ago. For anyone that doesn't watch any of the more recent stuff, she eventually married Flanders, and then it was only about a season or two after that unfortunately the actress did die in real life. So they've done a few, kind of callbacks and tributes to her, and kind of just crazy that coincidentally two of Ned's wives have died, and one because they wrote Maude out of the show because of, I think, a dispute with the actress, and this one because the actual actress passed away. So I think she's definitely, early on, she drives a lot with Bart. They do a lot of classroom focused stuff. Then it kind of slips away from that, but she's always there. They've got her man chasing character sort of thing. I think she's probably in this, I think you could put her in a B+, actually. I think she does enough with Bart, with Skinner, with Flanders later on. She has enough of her own storylines focused on her, things with Mo. Out of the teachers and stuff, she's the best one in terms of the character development stuff. Miss Hoover's not really developed for anything. But yeah, I think she's pretty good, and especially early on. I think starting with the second episode, Bart the Genius, she was a main part of that. And so they established her quickly and pretty good. I think she's just a good character. She's not over the top, but I think there's a lot of notes to her. She's somewhat realistic, to be honest. Now Fat Tony here, he's another one of these reoccurring guest stars. And he's I don't know how many times they've used him, but again, not really a cast voice, but he's always around. And I think good stories around them. The Homer joining the clown school thing obviously really, really did it well for the mob. And then, of course, Bart joining the mob, they had really good storylines. I think he's probably, again, they did a weird thing with him dying and being replaced. So he's technically a different character now, but that never usually matters. I think he's probably in this B category as well. I think we're still going to end up with a lot there. Now, this one, a almost one-off character. I think he was actually only in the, as a character in the present day in the show once, but they did do a callback episode where his son was in it and trying to get revenge on Homer. So this is from the Homer's Enemy episode, which is on literally anyone's list, is in the top 10 of any Simpsons episodes out there. So he is just absolutely an A-tier character. For a character that showed up one time, basically, the impression that he left, because the whole setup of the episode was him calling out the core of what Homer's character is, which is someone that fails upwards and just limps through life and whatever, and he's the hard worker and all this stuff, and it drives him crazy. So but the impression he made, and I think everyone knows that episode, and pretty important one. I think he, standalone as an A, he's probably, I would potentially say, and I think I'm about to get to him soon, there's maybe 2 one-time characters that I think are in the A tier, and I think that's one of them. So he may be close to the best one-off character. Professor Frink is, of course, a reference to Jerry Lewis and the Absent-Minded Professor. He really came into his own a little later than some of the others. He wasn't as huge in the first few seasons of it. They kind of had him now and then, but they eventually did some Frink-centric episodes, and again, he's a little bit one note, but they've kind of done some things with him. Lisa joining like the Genius organization was kind of good with them. He eventually came up with like a dating machine and a whatever, and a thing that scored everyone in town on their IQ and ranked them or something. So he's a good one, but I think he's a little bit above one note, but he's kind of in this character of like ancillary. You can do an episode or 2 around him, but it's not, you'd get sick of him if you saw too much of him. It's good that we don't see him every time. Then he can still stay good. Another one that's kind of a rare fella, they had, I think, 1 full episode that was really focused on Gil Gunderson, and he's, of course, the always disappointed salesman, the bad salesman. He's a reference to the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, which is a real estate thing that has the line "always be closing." If people are too young to have ever watched that movie, with like, there's a big speech by like Alec Baldwin, "always be closing," and whatever. And basically, it's people reference this a lot too. If you don't know where it's from, but they're like, we're having a sales contest. The first prize is a brand new Cadillac. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. And he's kind of that. There's a sad sack type character throughout the movie that is trying to get enough sales on this kind of scammy real estate thing to basically keep his job. And that's basically Gil. So I think he's a gem when you see him. You can't do a whole lot with him. When they tried to do a whole episode with him and Marge at Christmas, you kind of, I think that was about enough, but you kind of, it's good to have him around now and then as the sad sack, and he can show up as just kind of the salesman everywhere. So I think he's a quality character, but he's again in this slightly better than one note. There's some depth there, but whatever sort of things. We get back to another Simpson, this time Abe. Definitely Abe Simpson. I think it's going to be, you're going to be hard pressed to not put any of the Simpsons in the A category. And I think, again, maybe I'm going to add a row above to say that we've got to have an A plus sort of area. There's a lot of characters. I really like the Simpsons. So I think kind of you're going to just have, I just renamed this one again, whatever. I think you're going to basically have a tier of the Simpsons themselves up there. And obviously, despite these being guest stars and the best one-timer I think ever, you've obviously got your recurrings higher. And I'm going to leave S for now, probably till the very end, and then we'll think about it. Now here, I was alluding to the idea that he was the number one-time character, but Hank Scorpio is definitely in that category as well. Hank Scorpio tries to take over, well, I think succeeds in taking over the Eastern Seaboard by having his company that hires Homer, and they move out to the planned community, and he gets the nuclear reactor online so that he can threaten to blow up a bridge, I think, I forget which one. But a lot of really good scenes. Obviously, that whole thing is a reference to a Bond villain, just generically. Even the music they play kind of at the end of it is a reference to like Bond music, Bond songs, and just a really impressionable character. I think a lot of people remember him as well. So basically, you get Hank Scorpio and Grimy, as he liked to be called, and they're definitely both A tier, and debatable which one is better, probably a matter of preference, but definitely the two best one-off characters that they've ever had in the show. Then we are here with Hans Moleman. Hans Moleman he's not going to carry much. He's never going to be on screen for more than like 2 minutes at a time, probably not even that. But he's there to deliver one or two lines. He's there to be hitting the groin with a football. He's there to make some sort of, again, sad sacky type, woe is me sort of thing, to be the guy like in danger. And I think, again, he fits kind of in this category of like, it's sort of one note, but it's one note just piercing and hit really well. I think they just do really well with that character. He never has a bad moment, and there's never a bad, like, if you just wrote every line he's ever said, every one of them is a punchline, basically, and I think that just kind of works for him. Now we've got Helen Lovejoy, the gossipy preacher's wife. I think she's played her role every now and then, and when she does, when they need kind of that nosy neighbor to be kind of the moral outrage sort of thing, obviously that's her role in it, but it is a little bit of a one-note sort of thing again, but it's there. They also she's not played for comedy itself as much anymore. The comedy comes from her reacting over the top and kind of being the moralistic, preacher's wife sort of thing, and that plays, and it's a plot device, but it's not usually like funny in and of itself, and I don't think she really carries in and of herself, and she really only works with the Reverend there as well. Now we got the old Herman. I keep thinking I'm going to forget someone's name on one of these, but this is Herman, the one-armed military surplus sales guy. He had some really good early roles. Bart the General was his first, I think, appearance in the show. He showed up as kind of like Grandpa's friend. They have him always portrayed as like I don't know if they ever explicitly say it, but they kind of make him be like a Vietnam vet. But then I think they've alluded several times that he was never actually in the military or anything. So I don't even know that it's the case, but they have him come up and do some of those stereotypically militaristic, gun nut, survivalist sort of things, and I think he kind of plays that role well. But I think he's ultimately in this category here. They do a lot with him. I can't say he's totally one note, because they actually rotate his character a little bit every now and then to be like, is he a military guy, or is he a criminal, or is he a complete conspiracy theorist wacko, or is he a student of military history or something? Like, it's a little inconsistent sometimes with what they do, but maybe that's kind of the range that some people are in. But that's definitely him. Now we've got Homer, absolute no-brainer in A+. The whole, I'm going to make it look like he's yelling at Grandpa. Yeah, just an absolute, the show revolves around him, and there's really no debating that part. Early on, episodes, like, season 1 and 2 primarily were very, very, very Bart focused, and there was still a lot of that till probably season 4 or 5. I mean, not that they ever get away from Bart focused episodes, but it became clear that Homer was the show. That him and his stupidity that kind of evolved more and more was the show, and everything kind of centers around his wacky antics, and he's kind of the center of the whole thing. So obviously he's top tier, and we'll figure out who's the best later. The sea captain is excellent. He's, again, one note for sure, but it's a good note, and he's had some like really good moments, and I think he's one of these ones. They do it with a lot of the characters that they show as like super stereotypical and totally into one thing, and then they kind of display them as like really sad or lonely or something, which I guess is whatever. The best moment to me, and it was one of the, it must have been in like season 20 something that they did it, but I just thought it was like really on point, is basically they did a whole episode where Homer, Bart, Ned, and probably Rod were out at sea on a sailboat, like being the crew of it, and it was supposed to be like a father-son experience and bring them closer together and whatever. And then they kind of get back from the end of the episode, and then the sea captain is waiting there and is like, so there's no way that you guys would have went on an old school sailboat and not brought the sea captain, right? And it's just kind of, yeah, his sad little moment and him trying to cope with the fact that he wasn't invited to the one thing that he would have really excelled at. So, but I think he's kind of in this one note but better than the one note sort of characters there. So we've got Itchy, and Itchy, good character kind of, but they really only work as the duo. So they're never really outside their main role as the cartoon characters. They don't really interact with the others unless it's like one of the Halloween episodes where they, attack Bart and Lisa or something like that. They're kind of shown in like the Itchy and Scratchy Land ones and whatever, but they never, like, there's nothing to his character. He's a cartoon on TV in the universe, and there's nothing there. So it's a good show. It's a good premise. It's used as a good conveyance for other things, but I think ultimately he's a D character. He's not actually really much of a character. Ironically, out of Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie was the most developed character. Now we've got Jasper. Jasper's another one that doesn't talk very much, but when he does talk, it tends to be gold, and it tends to be him playing a character that just has no idea what's going on, is completely disoriented at all times, and Smithers shoots him in the leg, he doesn't even know it, who shot who in the what now, and yeah, I think he can probably go in a C. He's no mole man, but when he's there, he's pretty good. He's one of the good old folks. Now this guy, I don't think he has a name either. I think they refer to him as like squeaky voice teen, I think. And he of course works at every fast food place and corner store and minimum wage job around town. And again, he kind of plays the same sort of thing. I think you're never going to base anything around him, but he's good when he's there. He has his little moments. It's just kind of poking fun at the, zit-covered greasy teen thing. His voice is probably the best thing about him, which is basically what his character's named after. But I think he's a D. You can't really base anything around him. I don't even know if there's ever been like a plot point really too much around him. Now we've got Jessica Lovejoy. She is, I want to say she's only been in one episode, but I don't know if they ever brought her back. I think they brought her back kind of cameo style, but not like in her own episode. She was a pretty good character as related to Bart, but yeah, not super memorable, I don't think, to people. I think a good episode in general, but not much there. So I think she's kind of in that C category as well. Carried it once, and then that's kind of the end of it. Now we got Jimbo. I think he's going to go in the same category as Dolph. I think he's a little more, out of the three of them, he's kind of the most developed one, but I don't think enough to push him into the B category or B sharp category. He's just got to stick with the rest of the bullies there. Now we've got another mobster. This is Johnny Tightlips. Basically, just the guy that doesn't squeal. He's kind of a good play. He's good with Jimmy the Squealer, but he just says one line every like 50 episodes or so, or he just stands behind Fat Tony sometimes. Whatever. Who says I have a mother? It's just always kind of the same thing, and there's not much you can base it on. I think it's a cute character, a clever character, but he's whatever. He's a D. You don't have much on him. I don't have a lot of really bad ones yet. I mean, there's not a lot of bad characters in the show. Here we got grouped together Kang and Kodos. I guess it would be hard to evaluate them separately. Kang and Kodos, I think I've heard the trivia that they've only actually appeared in one episode that is canon. They're usually in like the Halloween episodes or like the themed episodes like that, but I think there was one episode they were in that was actually like the normal show. So they do exist, I guess. I think they're pretty good. I think they're again kind of in I think they're probably in this C category as well, where you can do a lot with them, but they're it's just kind of single note silly sort of thing, and it never really incorporates obviously into the main show, but them being kind of a mainstay in the Halloween episodes is pretty good. Now we got Kearney, and I think he's just going in C here as well with the rest of the bullies. Let's just stick them together and put them there. So good trio. They work well together. Can't argue with that. And whatever. I mean, my favorite moment probably with him is when he's got a son that lives in a drawer and he does a jig to distract Marge. Kent Brockman, they've done a few things with. In the probably early seasons, there's not a whole lot of like depth to him. He's just kind of the newsreader that's kind of your, anchorman style of newsreader. And there's not a whole lot there. In later seasons, they do kind of develop him a little more with like, Kent's people or something, and or Kent Cares, I guess, and then kind of have him get fired and whatever. But he's kind of in this C category as well, just kind of mid-tier. Does well, but again, I think basically there's like one episode centered on him, and that was about it. Now Kirk Van Houten, I think he's not always there, but I think he's got a pretty good character to put him, I think, into the B+ range. I think his whole thing with like the divorce and drawing dignity and just kind of the representation of a complete midlife crisis, divorced father sort of thing, trying to scrape things together and recover, just works out really well. And he's got some fairly funny stuff too, and just kind of is this mundane weirdo that just kind of works. Krusty I think is quite good. I think Krusty is going into an A category. I think he was a big part of early shows. He does a lot of episodes that are centered around him. His character is really just that, typical Hollywood old performer sort of guy. They kind of occasionally make references to him being kind of like a Ed Sullivan or a Johnny Carson, that sort of thing. Which, people, again, probably too young to know them. I think I'm a little too young to know them. But, I know who they are. But I think Carson was still on when I was a kid, but he was like my dad's favorite. And they had a Carson cameo on the show as well. But yeah, they just got him as like the old Hollywood, corrupt, like crazy guy. And they just have gotten a lot out of him and his character. So... And of course, there was originally the whole tie-in of Krusty was originally intended to be Homer, and there was supposed to be that Bart didn't respect his father at all, but really, really looked up to Krusty and whatever. And they just kind of took all that out right off the bat. But that was apparently originally the plan. Now we got more mobsters. This one is Legs. I think Legs is basically going in the same area where you got to have him there, but he's not going to carry much by himself. He makes the occasional quip. He doesn't even do much in the sense of jokes, other than to say that, I don't know, was it him that said the Manhattan was superb or something? But Legs is good. He's just there. You got to have him. Now Lenny. I think Lenny, now that I added this B+ category, we're going to bump these guys we're gonna bump these guys up here to a B+. So I think Lenny and Carl, inseparable duo on the whole show. They just kind of, it's Lenny and Carl, and they're just Homer's friends at work. They're Homer friends at the bar. They just kind of fill in for a lot of things. They're kind of Carl being kind of the sensible one, Lenny being not as dumb as Homer, but also just this kind of almost optimistic, goofy guy, and they just do a lot with them, and their relationship is a beautiful one. Now we've got Lionel Hutz, voiced by Phil Hartman, who was murdered in real life by his own wife. That's why these characters dropped off in, I think, the 7th season, 6th or 7th season. I think he was murdered in 92 or 93. So they went with whatever they had at the time, I guess. But Phil Hartman, hilarious guy from SNL, News Radio, and whatever, and just kind of like had that voice, did a lot of characters, and Lionel Hutz was definitely one of the best. He is he's probably in this category here as well of the B plus, and I may, in some sense, these guys should even be higher. I am just gonna jump them up a tier now that I've made myself some room. That's probably the way it really is. That Lenny and Carl up there, Lionel Hutz, just beautiful every time he's on the screen, and him and Troy McClure, who I'm not sure if he's in the list there, both excellent and just pure examples of Mr. Phil Hartman. Lisa, obviously going in the A+ tier here for now. Early on was not like a main focus of the show. Becomes kind of the moral voice to everything. I love that her voice just is that actress's real voice, Yeardley Smith, and it just works well. Her character, is kind of the haranguing one and the ethical one, but then they do play it off that they kind of make fun of her kind of virtue signaling or whatever you'd call it these days. From time to time, that they kind of show she's not as committed to the morally good thing as you would think if it starts to like affect her. So I think they play her well, but obviously, and also the smart one. I think in a lot of sense, what you get out of Lisa is Lisa interprets things through the audience's eyes. So everyone around is so wacky and whatever that often the audience seeing Lisa comment on the situation is the way that you would react if you were there. Like it's just kind of a this is ridiculous sort of thing, and the frustration that everyone around is completely ridiculous. Now we've got Louis. I want to say Louis. I think it's Louis. That one I'm not certain on. But yeah, he is the other mobster. He's probably the mobster other than Fat Tony that has the most lines. He's kind of got that grating voice, and he's kind of the more aggressive one in always wanting to just kill people or whatever. So I think he carries that well, but he's again, there's not much based on them. They really only work together as that unit, and the whole thing is really just carried by Fat Tony there. Now Lou is definitely a step above Eddie, and but probably is in that C range as well. There's not a lot that he's doing on his own. It's usually in support of Wiggum and in support of Eddie. Early on, I felt like they had a bigger role. Bart falls down a well and stuff when he's being Timmy O'Toole. They're kind of go there without Wiggum and find him, and then they kind of leave him there and like whatever. But I feel like Eddie dropped off, but Lou's kind of stayed there a little bit more, so he's kind of more the go-to. Now we got Luann Van Houten, not quite as well developed, obviously, as Kurt, and probably not even like they don't use her nearly as much. I think she kind of has her role, but it's a fair bit lower. I think she's again only ever used really as a prop against their marriage breakup sort of thing, whereas he is occasionally brought into the plot outside of that. So again, I don't think they use her well enough, but I think she's probably in that C category there. Now we got Luigi from Luigi's Pizza. Again, actually, he's another one. I don't know whether they continue to use this character due to, again, just ridiculously stereotypical voice, but it is a white, ridiculously stereotypical voice, so maybe it's fine. So I have no idea. I haven't seen him make appearance in a while. I think they've got some subversive things with him now and then, that he's not actually from Italy. It's just that his parents spoke broken English at home, and whatever. But they show him often as a little more sinister than you would think to begin with. But he's probably in that sort of, I don't know, he's even a D to me, of like, he's not caring a lot. He's kind of funny, but there's just not a lot there. Lunch Lady Doris, okie dokie. She's kind of that dry, deadpan one-liner. She's just kind of there because you need her there sometimes. Kind of one of the school people, but again, she's not carrying a whole lot together. Although oddly, in the Grease Lard of the Dance episode, they are actually both fairly prominently featured as it relates to Grease. And she also has the connection of greasing up Willie at some point. Lyle Landley, of course, he's another one that is absolutely a really good one-time character that they bring into the show. He sells them the monorail, totally scams the town, does a really good song. He probably has one of the best musical numbers that was ever on the show. And that episode was 100% written by Conan O'Brien, apparently, and he took it back to the writer. Usually someone writes something, they take it in and kind of rip through it and stuff. Apparently he brought it in and they're like, that's fine. We're just leaving basically every word of this. And I think this one really kicked off the whole musical numbers being a really big part of The Simpsons. And it just kind of works really well. He, again, same voice as Lionel Hutz, I think is on the same tier. The impact of the monorail episode is really good. It's definitely in, again, most people's top 10 for overall episodes, but I think the character itself doesn't rise to the Frank Grimes or Hank Scorpio level as a one-off, so he's going to stay in the B+. Now we've got Maggie. Doesn't say much, but definitely one of the core characters, most mysterious. My absolute go-to trivia on Simpsons to ask anyone is, and it'll be obvious since I'm talking about it, but which character on The Simpsons has been voiced by the most different people? And the answer to that is Maggie. That they've only actually said almost nothing, but every time that they've ever had her say a word in the show, it's been a different actor, and that's happened 8 to 10 times or something. So she's been voiced by Jodie Foster and James Earl Jones and just kind of weird guest stars that they had do it. So running gag is that she can't speak, but when they do, every time she speaks, it is a new actor or actress that they bring in for the voice, and it's usually just a line or two or even a word. I think her first word was just daddy in the Do It For Her episode. Now Marge, again, we'll put in the Simpsons tier here for now, and we'll make them fight it out later. She's just kind of got to be there. She could easily be a very one-dimensional character and do nothing but play off Homer, but she isn't. They do enough with her and have her have kind of her own interest, drives, and whatever, that I think they've made a much better character out of her over the years, instead of just having her as basically the punching bag for Homer and his antics, to be the one disappointed in him or upset about him or upset with the kids or whatever. So I think she's done a lot on her own. Now we got Martin Prince. This is a weird picture of him. Martin Prince he's an interesting thing, because you could do a lot of arguing that you don't need him, because Lisa is him, but he has to be the him in Bart's grade, and Lisa's the her in her own grade. But whenever they kind of interact, it's been not entirely clear if they're kind of saying Martin is smarter than Lisa. So I think they kind of have Lisa as certainly more clever and wise and stuff, but they show Martin as like, even though he's older anyway, but they show him as like actually a genius and better at math and stuff like that. Like he corrects her in an episode where they're doing math together and like whatever. So he's kind of there, but I don't know that I just don't know that you need him, but he's like he's kind of C tier. He has some good moments. Lemon of Troy, probably his best episode. And he's got a few good little notes there. Maud Flanders, of course, dead in season 11. And they had like a real life dispute with the actress and whatever, and they just kind of wrote her over the show. She was kind of she's another one that actually had just a lot of overlap. I think she's slightly better than Helen Lovejoy, but their characters were so similar that they were both the moralistic, think of the children sort of thing. And they had, I think the thing is they had Helen Lovejoy be more like haranguing and hysterical about it, but then Maud was more judgmental about it, or more like the condemning sort of one and like harshly condemning. And they always had her portrayed as like both of them very religious, but she's still kind of rolling her eyes at Ned Flanders because he's a little too much even for her. So they kind of show that she's not quite there, but he's the one driving that sort of thing. So that's pretty good. We got Sideshow Mel. Sideshow Mel, one of the other characters that they show is ridiculous, similar to Bumblebee Man, but then every now and then kind of allude to the idea that he's actually secretly a genius as well, and that he's got this whole other life going on, dating like supermodels and stuff that we don't usually see. And but I think again, you don't do much with him. He's kind of that one note, and they kind of play him as the whipping boy for Krusty, and occasionally just has these moments where he says something. All right, Milhouse. Milhouse is definitely going into A category. Everything Milhouse says is great. It's a great character. He is Richard Nixon, for anyone that doesn't know. So Richard Nixon's middle name is Milhouse, and they make a lot of plays on his name, that at one point his name is like Milhouse Mussolini Van Houten. And just a lot of, like, he's kind of the lovable loser, kind of out of touch kid that's going to get bullied. They constantly alternate, and I found that they still do this like 30 seasons in, but they constantly alternate between the idea that Bart is cool and Bart is an absolute loser. And they just kind of flip back and forth. He's like the cool, rebellious kid in some episodes, and in other ones, he's a complete loser that's getting picked on by bullies and everyone thinks is ridiculous. So, and I think it's Milhouse that keeps him grounded to that kind of lower level of it. And yeah, just a good character. He's probably the most kid-like kid, where just a lot of what he does is just some dumb kid sort of thing that's just like doing stuff. Yeah, just whatever. Mo is definitely going in the same category. He's an A. Mo, of all the bar people, just carries a lot. I think they started a lot of things out with the idea that Barney was Homer's best friend, but much more and more it's become like more clear that Mo is Homer's best friend, that he's really the one that that's the go-to. And there's just a lot of there's a lot of Mo episodes. There's a lot of kind of like really good Mo moments, and his character being a scumbag with kind of a still sort of a good heart. He's got bad instincts and a good heart sort of thing, and it just kind of works as a character. And they can often play a lot of the intolerant character through him. Like anytime they need someone to be that sort of like intolerant person, they can kind of play it through him, but then kind of have him soften on it or something like that. But he's just kind of a good thing. I think a few episodes with him that were really good. One that he goes back to his old college Swigmore U, I think it was, and tries to rekindle his love for being a bartender. And then another one where he ends up writing poetry with the help of Lisa, and becomes like an author and whatever. He does a lot. They do rags to riches with him like 20 times over the thing. Like the Flaming Mo thing started it, where he's like super successful and loses it all. And I think they kind of do that. I can think of 5 times off the top of my head where they kind of set him up as super successful, and then it's taken away from him by the end of the episode, which is just kind of a recurring theme for him, is like the perennial loser. Mr. Burns, definitely also going in the A category. Huge part of the show is around him, and he's the reoccurring villain of the whole thing. Back when Homer used to go to work, a lot of things centered around Mr. Burns, and obviously, yeah, he's just really good. They often show him glimpses of being redeemable and then kind of snatch it away from you and say, no, he's not really. But definitely a super strong character. Mr. Largo, of some of the teacher characters, probably on the lower end. They've tried to, in more recent seasons, they've made him kind of their gay character. I don't know if he ever was portrayed that way. I mean, Smithers is too, but they added him to that lot. But I think he doesn't... when they did that, they almost took away his original character of like the depressed music teacher that's kind of lost all hope in anything, and they actually kind of put him in a relationship that made him happier and stuff, and it just kind of warped it a little bit. I think they did that like after the 20th season sort of thing, but it was a weird transition. But he's not a stable character. There's not a lot based on him. He's not really someone that you're going to think of. He's just kind of there. I think if Lisa didn't play the saxophone, and then therefore there had to be stuff in band, then I don't even think he would exist. Like, I just don't, he wouldn't really be a part of it. But he's occasionally okay, but he's not great. Bernice is just down here lonely. I'm actually gonna potentially add Miss Hoover to the E. I think Miss Hoover is a harsher note of what Edna Krabappel is. She's a teacher that just absolutely doesn't like teaching. Like, I think Edna's kind of the put-upon teacher who's, struggling with it and, like, kind of, tilting at windmills. But Hoover is not even trying anymore and just kind of is whatever. And they kind of play that for laughs now and then, but I don't think they really do a super good job with her. She just kind of, there has to be a Lisa's teacher sort of thing, and I think she's there, and that's about it. But I just don't think there's ever anything too much around her. Ned is at least an A, obviously. He kind of drives the whole good and evil sort of dynamic between Homer. He's the one that never loses hope in him. He's got a bunch of, funny things, good character. He's got your stereotypically religious kind of, again, intolerant type stuff, but then he's obviously a really good person too. So they kind of play that and walk that line. But yeah, just kind of a really, really, really good character. So definitely in the top tier of the supporting cast around The Simpsons. Nelson, obviously the best bully. I think Nelson is actually into the B+ category. I think he's enough of his own distinct character with his own motivations and weird stuff that he is good. Like, everything's kind of funny, but they also play him as kind of a realistic depiction of like a kid that's just kind of left to his own devices and not looked after and whatever. And I think that plays for a lot of sympathy to kind of be like, why is a bully like this sort of thing? And it just kind of works. And then of course the ha-ha, you can't underestimate that stuff. So good man Nelson, and you gotta love the best. Otto started out as a much bigger character. I think early on, again, when things were very Bart focused and very school focused, I think Otto was supposed to be kind of like a bigger part of it. I think they had him set up to be like Bart's role model that wasn't a good role model, which is kind of what Krusty is as well, a role model that's not a good role model, but him being the more accessible one that Bart could actually like talk to and get advice from or whatever. And I think, but ultimately being like the unreliable adult sort of thing. And I think he's a bit, they just dropped him. Like I just feel like they dropped him a lot. He did some good things, but I think he just never quite carried what they, I think, originally intended for him. And so I think it's keeping him in a C. Like early season or two, you'd think they'd continue, and they just kind of didn't with him. Now I'm gonna mix up Patty and Selma, but I'm gonna largely group them together. And I think this is Selma, if I'm not mistaken. I should know this, but yeah, I think this is Selma. I think Selma has to go in a. Again, they operate as a pair, but I think the pair operate in the B sharp level, where they work together, but then Patty kind of breaks away all the time. Selma's just kind of content or something, but I think Patty kind of trying to break away and has more ambition, I think, in life than Selma does. They do a couple good episodes kind of around her, but obviously they function as a duo, and so one's a tiny bit above in terms of interest, but that's their relationship of like reacher and anchor sort of thing. Mayor Quimby, obviously a reference to every Kennedy that's ever lived. He is probably, I think they do a bit with him. He's not quite a Wiggum. He's probably in this category of like, they do enough with him that there's like development and humor there, and you can kind of base a bit around him. More than some of these like totally one note things that you can only use him for a minute or two, but he's kind of a little better, and the whole depiction of the corrupt politician world is pretty good. Got Rainier Wolfcastle. He's good, but he's also kind of nothing. I think they've had him be part of an episode or two. Obviously he's the Arnold Schwarzenegger, since I'm pointing out references that these guys are too. He's either in a D or potentially even an E category, because you just can't do very much with him. Like, his biggest episode was probably his biggest episode, they had Reese Witherspoon on as a guest that was Bart's girlfriend or something, and he was in a lot of that. But he was also in a lot of the early episode where Homer climbs the murder horn sort of thing, and then of course they just kind of depict him throughout. But I think he's a D. He's similar probably to Itchy, but he does exist in the real world. So he's there, but most of the time you see him, it's like on screen and he's not really there. It's kind of a McBain movie or something like that. So it's a little different. Ralph is just up there. Ralph is an A-tier character. I think everything he says is gold. Infinitely quotable. Good character. Again, one note a bit, but they've done enough stuff with him to give him like emotional depth, or kind of like show the struggles of Ralph. And then they even have him run for president at one point. And as far as I know, they leave that episode where he wins the nomination. So whatever. But I think they've just done enough with him to both make him sympathetic and crazy and stupid and whatever, that he's just quotable. Reverend Lovejoy, he's there, you need him, kinda, but he doesn't. Again, you get it, like Maude and Helen Lovejoy, you get a bit of overlap between him and Ned. You need both, obviously. You need the pastor if you're going to have Ned, because obviously Ned is very based on church. But I find that Lovejoy doesn't cover a lot. He's kind of got the same lack of enthusiasm about anything, that he's the religious version of a Krabappel or a Hoover. And every now and then they allude to kind of more depth with him, but I just don't think they ever do enough with him to whatever. And there's not a whole lot that you can point to as like, that's a really funny quote, or that's a, good moment or whatever. I think people are mostly just playing off him, and it's his like boredom over it that's supposed to be kind of the funny thing. Now we've got Rod and Todd. I'm going to put them as a duo. I think they kind of play together, but they really kind of only play as the sons of Ned. Like they're not really good standalone characters. I don't know if it's ever been totally clear, like, are they homeschooled? Because they're not like in school, I don't think. They're never shown there. Maybe I'm wrong, but which makes sense that the super religious kids could be homeschooled, but that would be a little weirder too once Maud was gone, because who's doing it if he's at work and whatever. But yeah, good duo, but they just kind of reflect that sort of religious upbringing. They have some funny moments, funny quotes, but it's mostly people like picking on them and whatever. I think Scratchy, you're in the same boat as Itchy. I think if anything, Scratchy is a little bit better. There's a little more emoting and stuff going on there. Sherry and Terry, I think, like they play it again for jokes. I think it's a good creepy twin sort of thing. But they're probably a tier below the Rod and Todd level. And that's probably where I'd stick them. Skinner, I think Skinner is again going in an A tier. I think he carries enough, has a good enough character, enough interactions with everyone. There's tons of Skinner-based stories, tons of Skinner-based humor, tons of Skinner-based memes that still stick around to this day, both in the Bitcoin and out-of-touch world. So I think he's just super, super good as well. Smithers is another one. I think he's developed well enough that he's kind of in that A tier as well, as just kind of a really good rounded character. He's definitely anything but one note sort of thing. So, and he's got that same sort of thing, and they often show some interactions between like him and Lisa, but they both know that everything around them is stupid and ridiculous. And I think that kind of plays well. That when you're at like Homer's work, Smithers is the guy that knows everything is stupid, and when you're kind of in the rest of it, Lisa's the one that knows everything is stupid. And when they meet, it's kind of like they have that acknowledgement almost with each other. Snake is a little bit one note, but he's probably better than like say the mobsters and whatever. He's probably in that bully range here. As good, shows up now and then. You clearly need the criminal, but he's not gonna take a lot home. He kind of is a mainstay in some episodes, but he's not whatever. And he's a little bit predictable. There's nothing that he says that's like hilarious or quotable, but he just kind of is the guy he is. Now we've got Troy McClure. You may know him from such other characters as Lionel Hutz and Lyle Lanley. Again, all voiced by the same guy. Basically, kind of the same character of kind of the washed up actor doing infomercials and stuff like that. Really good character. They definitely would have continued, I think, with both him and Lionel Hutz much longer if Phil Hartman wasn't murdered. So that definitely is unfortunate, but yeah, these three, you got inseparable. They're basically the same thing, but super good characters overall, and all you never see them in the same room, all have the identical voice. And groundskeeper Willie, I think you got to put Willie in this B+ tier with these other not quite everyday characters, but like super good characters, overall. I think now looking at it, that's everyone. I'm trying to think who's like missing from some of this stuff that was kind of big in particularly earlier seasons. And I don't really know who else there is. Like there's like Marge's mother. There's Homer's mother, which neither of them are present here. There is the school kids, like none of the other Martin's here and Milhouse is here, and Sherry and Terry are here, but like Wendell and Lewis and those kids are just not here. The bullies are here and whatever. I think some of this, like I look at this and kind of say there's not a lot in the low tier, and I think it's mostly that they just didn't include characters in that lower tier. I'm kind of tempted to, I don't know, this is already probably long enough, but I'm tempted to like look up what other characters kind of come to the top of my mind, but yeah, basically I think that's it. There's like Mrs. Glick, like one of the neighbors. There's yeah, I don't know. There's a number of other characters that could easily be there, I think, that they just didn't put in. And I think the thing is that you would end up with a lot of them in the D, E, and F range where there's just kind of nothing there. So, you know, Lewis and Wendell and stuff would basically be down here. Uter is actually a big one that's not here. Uter would probably be higher up on this list as one of the school kids. Janie is also not here, one of Lisa's friends. They didn't have a lot of the other one-time characters, like the Bart's girlfriend episode, the older babysitter that hooks up with Jimbo and whatever. They didn't have her mother, who Marge goes out with and does the Thelma and Louise thing with. So she's not there or whatever, and she kind of came back a couple times. So they're missing some of the people that were fairly important early on in the show, but they're just kind of not there. So you could obviously with The Simpsons have like 800 characters, probably if not more. But I think a lot of the ones they left out is kind of the reason that you don't have anything down here. Now, if I had to though, and I think I will, if you had to take one and kind of drop them into a delete this sort of thing, I think the ones that you could absolutely do without at all are probably, I mean, I think Bernice you could basically get rid of. The other candidate would be Largo, you could do without, and you wouldn't really notice that he wasn't there. And Lunch Lady Doris isn't bad, but I don't think you would ever notice if she just kind of wasn't in the show. She's not really necessary to it. Now, on the top side, I think we have to make the acknowledgement that Homer just is the S tier. Homer's the show. Homer's the character. He's the most quoted thing in the world, and he drives the entire thing. He's just the entire show, basically. But if we were to pick one beyond him, that is kind of like the standout character that is maybe not one of the core family of Simpsons, then I'm a little hard-pressed to do it. I've got a lot of affinity for Burns. I think he definitely has, you know, he plays the role of the villain, and he's the only one kind of on this list that's really the recurrent villain for everyone. But I would say if there's one character that is not one of the Simpsons, that is like the most developed character, the most explored character, still does a lot of funny things, still has a lot of funny lines and moments, and is really just kind of, yeah, the most explored character in terms of all kind of the depth there. I think it's actually Mo. There's debate. I think you could definitely say these guys are probably into the A+ range as well. They're probably close to as important to Homer's surrounding cast and Skinner to the kids. You know, he's the antithesis of Bart and his nemesis. They're there. I think Smithers has to stay a little bit below Burns, but Lenny and Carl obviously up there. You could make the case that Krusty's there, but I think he's not just like there every episode, and I think that appeals into him. But I think this is kind of the dynamic. Homer definitely of the Simpsons, the main one, and then I think of all the supporting cast, Mo is probably the most featured, has the most things around him, and probably has some of the funniest things going on. Basically, you've got two dynamics of a great episode, and it's Homer doing something with Mo, or it's Bart doing something with Skinner. And that's essentially it. And then the secondary, even though it used to be more central, was Homer doing stuff with Ned. And basically that's how it plays out. But I think the Homer and Mo stuff, just because of the way they interact, stupid with a little bit crooked and shady, just works out really well. So there you go. That's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Super long this was, but there's a lot of characters, and hey, The Simpsons is great. So yeah, check it out, and I'll do more of these that you'll probably see soon. And if you haven't, watch some recent seasons. Give them a try. They're all on Disney Plus now, like up to season 30, I think, even though they're on season 32 now. But yeah, look up like some of the top rated episodes in the past like 20 years. If you're one of the people that stopped at like season 8, season 12, check out some of the ones that did really well in those seasons. There's I forget the name of it. There's a really good episode in like season 17. If you never got past 8, check out Trilogy of Error in season 12. But yeah, there is some good things still there. It's just they're not as tightly tied together anymore, but it's still worth it. So there you go. Let me know what you think.